Can you
I got
imagine?
access to all the buttons. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
you
hit
have
it
the
someday.
buttons. So one of these days, you're just going to do it.
Yep.
You know, cinema verite, by the way, is one of those words that thank goodness I heard it said before I ever said it out loud, because I would have called it cinema verite. And I really, I just didn't know any better.
Well, if you've seen it written, I mean.
Backpack. Yeah.
That will never get old, right?
I am so excited. I'm excited because I like to do that to you. I'm excited because I cannot believe we have Mark here. This is going to be a grand old show. John, stick around. You're going to love Mark. Mark Levy is like your kind of guy for sure.
Mark's going to have to be very funny after yesterday. He's got a tough act to follow.
Oh, this is so unfair. It's ridiculousness. I didn't even begin to expect what happened. But you know what? The thing is, everybody's different and everybody brings their kind of a thing. And Mark and I were supposed to have just a minute or two conversation the other day because someone, a third party connected us and said, you really need Mark's help. But I was like, you don't know. You don't know how much, I love Mark and I could talk to him any day. We talked nearly 2 hours. And probably the last hour of it was, I'm going to let you go. Okay, I'll let you go.
That's like talking to my sister.
Oh gosh,
running
that's
some
a
fun
very
facts.
different experience when you talk to your sister about that.
Well, it is because I sprinkle in, okay, love you, love you, okay, love you.
Exactly.
If I could just hit the button on my sister, I would do it.
You could do it,
but I can't. You can't.
Hello, handsome
Hello.
man.
Hey, I'm going to use that love you when I'm pitching people or whatnot in business conversations. Here's what you need. If they come up with an objection, I'm going to overcome it and then say, love you.
Love you.
Or I give them a challenge. I want you to do this. Love you.
It works.
The very dangerous part of bringing up old comedy bits is you sort of kind of forget things. And one of the details is that there was a comedian from the 80s, and it could have been any of the comedians from the 80s. It was like Pauly Shore or anybody like that. And what their bit was is they were talking about getting pulled over by a cop. And when the cop comes over to the window and they roll the window down, do you have any reason why I stopped you? Do you know why I stopped you or whatever? He just looks up and he goes, I just want you to hold me. Says you get let go every time.
My favorite pullover joke is one where the guy is driving and these friends get really drunk and they put their blind friend behind the wheel. And so he gets pulled over. And the cop asks for his license, and he's like, I don't have a license because I'm blind. He's like, why is he driving? Everyone's like, he's the only one who's sober. And so then the cop's like, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Mark, you are known for a lot of things. You help people with creativity. You design magic tricks for other people. You have one of the longest running magic shows going on in New York that is fabled and amazing. You've drawn in today people from Ireland. And you've brought in people from Bilbao and Las Vegas, Nevada, even also Scotland. When I feel like your skill set, your particular set of skills, I feel like it was not very well harnessed for some amount of time. What was the thing that made it from you were like a neat weirdo into you're a neat, very successful weirdo who could really kind of harness power all the time?
That's an interesting question. No one's ever asked. First, before I answer that question, I want to know if Carrie can play that guitar on the wall while it's on the wall.
I can. Not like
while
as
it's on the wall.
Some people.
While it's on the wall.
Well,
not
no.
playing the guitar.
I mean, I can make sounds when it's on the wall. No, but I have an electric also. You just can't see it as well.
Listen, while you guys are discussing that, and before you answer your question, Fred, why do you keep scheduling things during this time, Fred? This is like our time. I thought we had something here.
Fred Faulkner the fourth.
Fred Faulkner.
Really disappointing. Oh. Really disappointing.
He's really only fourth I know.
He doesn't get, and I love you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
None.
So
Mark,
back to what you had said. So I used to be in the book industry. I was the director of the third largest book wholesaler in the world. And so I helped sell millions and millions of dollars worth of books. And so I had done that for about 14. So I could very quickly size up what would make a book sell and how to pitch it. And so after I had done that for about 14 years, I left that and I opened up my own business, which is essentially looking at people's business as if it was a book. In other words, what is it that makes it sexy? What are the ideas that you're leading with in your quote unquote book right now? What are your ancillary ideas? What are the stories that you have in there? And what are the lessons that you're telling? And if we move things around, if we took one of your ancillary ideas and made it what your quote unquote book was about, would it be a better selling book? Right? So understand, right? That's for books, but that's also for whole companies. That's for the whole thing. So, I mean, that's really what it is I did. I started doing this in 2001. Just from that, looking at things like they were books.
There's book packaging, and then there's kind of like book design. Is this one? Do you differentiate that way? And two, is that what you're speaking to when you talk about it that way?
You're talking about metaphorically, right?
Well, of course, but I mean quite literally as well. When you were saying I took somebody's messy, stupid book and made it into a useful book, what is that? What would you label that?
I mean, so what I tell people I do is I help them come up with their big, sexy idea, their signature idea, the idea that they're going to be known for throughout the world. And I help it come through loud and clear in everything they do, right? I help organizations do that, brands do that, thought leaders do that. So it's the whole idea of like, what is the main idea of what you're doing right now? And is that the best idea that should be the main idea? Maybe there's something that's underexploited in what you're doing, or maybe there's an important story that you tell people, and maybe you're telling them one lesson from that story when there's an even better lesson from that story. And maybe we should move that lesson to the fore of your entire brand. And everything you should be doing should be about that kind of thing, right? Makes sense? So I'm saying I used to do that in the world of books in order to pitch books. And then I left the world of books and now I just do it for organizations and thought leaders.
And people who want books, who want to write books.
It's the same skill set. You could also say, if you want to take away the idea of books, you could take the idea of magic, right? You guys heard I'm a magician. I co-created on TripAdvisor, the highest rated live show in New York City. It's rated higher than exactly even the musical Hamilton. It's run for 20 years. It's called Chamber Magic. There's actually a Chamber Magic Day in New York City by proclamation of the mayor. So another way you could say that I do things is I essentially look at what you're doing like it's a magic trick. So a magic trick, what you're always trying to do is you're trying to freak people out. That's what you do in any kind of magic trick. So whenever I'm working with someone, I'm always looking for, I interview them, we talk, and I'm always looking for what's the freak out here. Like not just what's the thing that'll get you on base, but what's the thing that will create such a visceral reaction in, that people are going to tell their friends, like they won't be able to sleep.
So how does Chris freak people out? Let's deconstruct this with a specific example. How does Chris freak people out?
Yeah. Oh, well, with Chris, we would have to go into this. Go ahead, Chris. You were gonna...
I got nothing. I'm smiling politely. I had a whole different direction.
You've known him for many years. So
right.
I
would have to go through all of Chris's stuff. And by the way, I've read like 4 of his books, but I have to go through every single thing he does. But I will tell you something very meaningful. I'm just reading his, what's your book? Your freak book?
Oh, The Freak Shall Inherit the Earth.
Yeah, that is just so great because that's about how the way to be big in the world is to be who you are, independent of who people think you should be.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like that's a message I'm kind of getting from that. And I see that in looking through Chris's stuff. I know language is very important to him. In a bunch of different books of his, he actually points out language specifically. So I'd have to look at things in greater depth and ask him a lot of questions about it. So that's
not a superficial process.
Terry, that I'm not. What's that?
Yeah.
Not a superficial process then.
No. Oh my God. Essentially, here's what it is. Here's how I approach things. If you knew what you should be saying in order to capture everyone's attention, you would be saying it, and you would be far too busy to speak to the likes of me.
Not necessarily. I'm really shy.
Right. So if you knew that, we wouldn't be speaking. So there's something missing in what it is you're doing. And so what it is you've probably approached things from a linear, logical way, a chronological way, ABCD way. But the human mind is not a precision instrument. We have things filed in our mind, in places where we don't know. So it is essential that I get you off track from the way you normally answer things. I call myself the human inner ear infection. My job is to make you dizzy. My job is to make you screwed up. So I ask you all kinds of questions about from when you were born and what did you do in high school and what, and by the way, even in organizations, like large organizations, I would ask the same kind of question, because what we need to do is we need to look in places that they haven't looked yet. And so often, by the way, I'll question people in dichotomies, in differences. I'll say things like, tell me about your business. Tell me everything that's obvious about your business. Like it's just embarrassingly obvious. That just start telling me about it. And by the way, the reason why I do that, and tell me if I'm telling you too much. You asked me one question.
That's good.
Right.
We don't need to be here, actually. Hold on.
Right.
Here,
the reason,
go ahead.
Right. Oh, good. Excellent. The reason why I ask people about what's obvious, it's one of the first questions I ask, is because often they will try to be too smart in speaking to me. Like they'll try to come up with some like super colossal, big, sexy idea thing, and trying to come up with something so big so quickly makes people stuck. And so I invariably ask them about what's obvious first. And then from what's obvious, I often jump to, well, what's surprising about what it is you do? What's something that when you do it, no one would expect? Like if someone were to hang out with you for a week and watch you do your work, what would they see that they just didn't expect to happen?
Oh my
So
God. I don't know what that. I will not allow that. You are not going to watch me work for a week.
Right.
No.
That is something else. But one thing I'm thinking of as I'm listening to it is that the other thing that I know for sure about Mark, that scene in, I always get them mixed together, like Infinity War and Endgame, but the scene where Doctor Strange is sitting there and he's like processing millions and millions and millions of possibilities. That's Mark every minute of his life. That is Mark, like all the time. He's thinking about 85 different things he'd rather say or also say. And you only get the one that he's pushing through his lips at that moment.
Right.
But
well, I appreciate you saying that. I tell clients when I work with them, because I have to prepare them for this, what it's like for us to work together.
Right.
I say, I want to tell you right up front that I swing at every pitch. So if you say something to me, I may not say it, but I'm saying, how do we make that the big idea about what it is you do? Everything you say. So I caution them, I'm going to say a lot of stuff. They shouldn't jump on something instantly that I say as, oh, this is my big sexy idea, because I swing at every pitch. That's how you get to the idea. You don't hold back.
Right. It is not, that, how you beat Hamilton. It's because he's really only not giving away his shot, but you have a machine gun. Like you're just going to shoot at all the things. Mark, one thing that people have a problem with innovation, you slipped right past it like fast, but I want to put a highlighter all over it, is that so many people think in a linear way, and that never gets us to the place that we need to go to. It's a tool in the belt, but it's always going to have to be sort of a nonlinear jump that gets somebody somewhere. Is there even a way to start teaching people to start thinking nonlinear? Is there any way you could say, go from a bagel to not a cupcake, but go from a bagel to a washing machine? How does that work?
Yeah. The reason why we think in a linear way, I believe at least, is that everyone listening to this right now, watching this, we're all very successful. We've done a lot. We've accomplished a lot in the world. And so we tend to hang on to the pieces of philosophy and the stories and the strategies that have gotten us far in life. It makes sense. Like you want to do that. They work. It's the problem is that when you come up to a situation that's unlike any other situation you've been in before, your mind is going to spool through those same things that have made you great. but they're not making you great in this situation. And it's hard to escape that situation. So what I do is I teach people something that I call enforced creativity. And it's this idea where you put yourself in a situation where you're playing a game essentially, where you have no option, but as long as you follow the rules of the game, that you have to deviate from your normal way of thinking. If you follow, you have no option, because otherwise we're going to go back to that normal way of thinking. Right?
So like
Makes
hiring
sense?
a dominant to tell you what to do all the time and making sure it's different than what you would normally do. What does this look like?
I teach them things like I wrote the book Accidental Genius, using writing to generate your best ideas, insights, and concepts. It's about how to use 10-minute free writes, right, that have no rules, where as long as you write faster than you normally do and you don't stop for any reason whatsoever, your linear, logical, your inner editor cannot keep up with the production of words. So you have to start reaching for things that you don't normally reach for. And at times, accidental genius, you create accidents, happy accidents from that. And I have other, right, like just techniques like that, just techniques, sending people out into the world. And so one of my clients who recently wrote a Wall Street Journal bestseller, who you guys know very, very well, I coached him on coming up with the concept for his latest book. And so what it was, he wanted to write something brand new. And so I said, have you ever been to Comic-Con before? And he said, no, I always want to go. And I said, great. I want you to go to Comic-Con, and I want you to interview at least 10 people there. And I want you to come back to our next session and tell me 5 things about marketing, because he's a marketing guy. I want you to tell me 5 things about marketing that you didn't know when you came to Comic-Con, that you learned at Comic-Con. So in other words, if he followed the rules of the game, speak to 10 people, go to this place that was fresh to him, and tell me 5 things he didn't know when he got there, that's enforced creativity. He has to come up with something new by definition.
And you need to know that person is also was an occasional model in Japan.
Right. That's right. That's right.
He was just on the show last week. By the way, Clay Bear snuck into the room. I accidentally made him hungry because I mentioned bagels. And Clay Bear is he does a thing called Perfect Pitch, where he goes and tries to, help people kind of really boil the ocean until they get to their perfect thing to talk about. So he's another Mark Levy that I have in this universe, that I go and I say, Clay, I'm feeling like a big stupid idiot, make me smarter, and he helps. So it's good to surround yourself with people like a Mark Levy. But would you agree that you're more a condiment than a meal? Like you can't have your madness all the time. A business wouldn't operate with a Mark Levy. A business innovates with a Mark Levy.
Oh, right. Me as right. So I was going to say, the big sexy idea of what your business is about, like that is what your whole business functions on, right? So I was going to say that needs to be present at all times.
Right.
But as far as me as a person who helps bring things about, yes, I tend to, I'm on hyperdrive right now because we're live here, and, and you have a guitar on the wall and you have a bee in the background and all kinds of things, and Kermit. So I'm in hyper mode. I'm not always like this, but yes, I'm more about what's the story here that we're not seeing? What can we come up here with that's going to disrupt? And so you don't want constant disruption. Although, by the way, you need disruption more now than one of my clients, Nadia Jeksimbayeva. She does reinvention. She for organizations, and from her statistics, it used to be that organizations needed to reinvent every 50 years. She has statistical background that it used to be like in the days of Woolworth. It was 50 or 75 years. Then a few years ago, it was like 7.5 years. And now it's every 2 to 3 years that an organization needs to redo itself entirely just because of the environment we're in. And it's probably even less now. So you need disruption more than you think in your thinking. But right, it's probably not a daily thing.
It can be counterproductive. Like if you don't give something a shot, a real shot to see how it works, with modifications, then you're leaving money on the table because you're investing all this time and money into things and going, well, that didn't work. Start over again.
Right. Well, it's kind of like if you're creating a show, you not only just need an idea for the show and all the ways you're going to freak people out, but you need to practice the show and you need to let the show run. So absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So I have a question. This is, by the way, I have a sort of bad habit, and that is that I never can sort of make a straightforward segue, but I can make a 90-degree segue.
Yes.
Of course, it's covered by Mark's label, but that's okay.
So you can do it again. It will make you happy.
It'll make me happier if I do it again. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. My 90-degree segue. Do you think that the movie The Prestige was baloney insofar as every magic trick has a pledge, a turn, and a prestige? I feel like we've just sent people on the wrong direction in if they're going to learn how to become magicians.
Oh, well, I only saw The Prestige once and I liked it.
Sure.
But those categories are not categories that magicians use.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Well, there's no prestige. There's no such thing as a prestige. As a matter of fact, as a joke with my friends and I who are magicians, they'll like do something and I'll say, was that the prestige right there? It's an inside joke because there is no such thing.
Got it.
By the way, interestingly, when The Prestige came out around the same time, was it The Illusionist?
Yes.
With Edward Norton? I like The Illusionist. I like The Prestige very much. I like The Illusionist even better. But that when I saw the two, Stephen Sondheim came to our show, came to Chamber Magic, and I hung out with him afterward. And amazing guy. And I asked him, by the way, you would call him Steve Sondheim. And I asked him, I said, which one of those did you like better? And he way liked The Prestige. Like more, which I was an illusionist guy. So it was really interesting. I had to rethink. Maybe I didn't like The Illusionist more because if Stephen Sondheim likes something, I got to like that one. Like,
right.
I'm nothing compared to him. So,
but maybe he just wants to keep the secrets and he's like, that one's less accurate. So I like it better.
That's right. And it's always funny. I told you, Stephen Sondheim, it's Steve Sondheim. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I worked for a publishing house. And one day I was sitting in my cubicle and my friend's phone rang. We all had editors that we responded to, and his phone rang and there was no one else on the floor. And so I got up and I picked up the phone and I said, the editor's name. I said, so-and-so's line, may I help you? And the guy on the phone said, is so-and-so there? And I said, no, he's out to lunch. Can I take a message? And the guy on the end of the phone said, well, just tell him Steve King called. And I said, does he have your number, Mr. King? And he went, yeah, I think so. And I hung up and I said, oh, Steve King.
Steve King. Yeah,
Got it. Right.
And you're like, I just really want to have your number. So I'm going to take it anyway.
Can you repeat it anyway?
I swear I will never, ever use it.
Right.
Just want to have it.
Right.
Paul Giamatti.
Exactly, John. I agree with you. Yes.
Every movie with Paul Giamatti is magic.
I love him on Billions. I love that he pretty much has never opened his mouth in the entire 4 seasons running so far. Talks through his teeth. He only opens his mouth to eat the food. So, Mark,
like Brad Pitt, he does the same thing. He's eating in every movie.
Oh, he eats in every movie. That became a meme.
Yep. Brad Pitt does that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you watch like Ocean's 11, he's got something he's constantly eating. Well, every movie.
The way I don't know, Sean Penn, I haven't seen a movie in many years, but every single movie ever was in, he used to cry in. Every film he cried in. Same way Tom Cruise, every film he sprints in. Like breakneck, it doesn't matter. He could be like in a courtroom drama and he's going to be running.
He has in like The Firm. He did.
Right?
Yep.
Right. We should put all of them in one film, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and have them all do their meme.
And that's it. That's all they have to
do.
And
that's it. That's the whole film. It's like a Zoom thing where Brad Pitt eating, Tom Cruise is running, Sean Penn's crying.
So well known, it doesn't even have to be them. Like somebody just did a fake political ad, like Cruise for President 2020, and it's just some guy sprinting that like vaguely looks like him, and people actually were like, "Wait, is this real?"
Right.
That's all they know about him. He's like a blur.
Right. And in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was in a Mexican restaurant eating. That's right. Although mostly drinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Robert Downey Jr., I guess, very famously hid snacks all over the sets on all the Marvel movies. And to the point that they're literally the Russo brothers had hired someone to try to go and find Downey's treats.
The snack wrangler?
Yeah, the snack wrangler. And they never were successful. So there's so many scenes in this movie where he's drinking or eating something that were absolutely not approved by the Russo brothers. It just happened.
Oh, that's great. If there was a meme of you guys, what would the meme be?
Carrie has a few. Carrie has a few gifts that she could probably.
I have a couple now, not because I asked for them.
Demonstrate them.
I make my face is very expressive, apparently. So, a couple.
I'm evidently just known for things I say. I don't know. People impersonating me tend to do it verbally a lot. You know, I don't.
What do they say?
Carrie.
No. I'm not doing it. No, I refuse.
There's a bunch. Like if someone gives me advice and I don't want the advice, I'm so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. You know?
Or if it's an idea that someone proposes that you have no intention of ever using, you'll be like, fun.
Fun.
Like, so it's independent out there. It's like in this fun world that's independent of your
in the sense
reality.
that we're never going to do it. But sure, theoretically, it's fun.
And if you say something and I do not know how to respond to it, I just say nice. Just nice. You know, somebody be like, oh, I just took my dog out for a walk. Nice. And I say it like that little meme of I don't know where this guy is from. He's possibly African descent. And there's someone's talking to him and he just sort of, his only response back is, okay. And that's sort of what I'm responding. Like, I'm just sort of like, don't know.
You would be bad at hostage negotiation.
Oh my God.
I'm going to kill. Nice.
Chris Voss would he'd have all of my cues. You must have met him. That seems like your kind of guy.
No, but I've worked with someone from the FBI. So.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. You bypass Voss. You just go right to the FBI. You helped me remember a story about going to lunch with your magician friend with whom you partnered for Chamber Magic, right. Steve Cohen, who pulls out his flaming wallet or something like that. And even then you said, I'm not even sure that was him. But, you know,
I think someone else pulled out their flaming wallet in the restaurant we were in.
Magicians who can do sort of fast, you know, like when people tell a joke, the comedian just wants to stab them in the face until they don't breathe anymore. Magicians don't feel that way. They seem to love the idea of, can we put out their, you know, can you throw a fun joke, you know, or fun magic trick into a table kind of a moment? Do you always have like a little trick handy, I guess is my question.
Oh, I see.
People could be like, entertain me. Yeah.
Right. Magicians in general, you know, they love to perform because you have to understand the reactions they get from people are astonishment and freak out and whatnot. So that's their contribution to the world. So they want to give that gift all the time. So yeah, magicians tend to want to perform a lot and in, you know, all kinds of situations. I myself do not do that because for the last several decades, now this is turning serious, but not too serious. I've had a benign familial tremor. I have a tremor in my hands. It's a biological tremor. I actually take medicine for it or whatnot. And so it's often difficult for me to sometimes and notice I'm holding with two hands, to even hold up a cup or something normally and take it without even trying to do any intricate sleight of hand. Mm-hmm. So I myself, the tricks that I tend to do all are mind tricks and tricks where I don't have to do manipulation or so. So that's me. So you said, is there always a trick that you can do? And there are in a lot of situations, but I don't take advantage of it as much as most people because of that situation.
How do you create new magic tricks for shows? I mean, it's like there's only so many ways to saw a lady in half or like do some of the old classics. How do you come up with a new one?
So in the 1940s, there was a magician, and it justifies a full shot on me. I like that. Yeah. In the 1940s, there was an engineer and amateur magician named Daryl Fitzke, who wrote a book called The Trick Brain. And in The Trick Brain, he wrote that there are 19 different categories of magic tricks. And I won't go through all of them, but it's like number one was a trick appears, an object appears. Plot two was an object disappears. Plot three is an object changes places with another object, and so forth. There are 19 different tricks. So even if you think there are millions of tricks, if you get down to the basic level, there are only 19. So in order to create, you take one of those plots, but imagine from a meaning perspective, the difference. So if an object appears out of nothing, that object could be a dime appearing, or it could be a tiger. And those things, not to be funny, but like they say very different things about the performer or the performance space or so. And by the way, you can produce a tiger, or you can produce a white tiger, or you can produce like bees, or you can produce, roaches. You can produce a single human being or a crowd of human beings. It's like, where do I want to take this? But there's really only 19 plots. But that idea, by the way, it sounds like a very magic specific thing. But, I have a background as a writer. So they say that there's only two types of stories. There's a stranger comes to town, or the hero goes on a journey. A stranger comes to town, or a hero goes on the journey. Or if you're writing comedy, it's either there's a normal character surrounded by crazy people, or there's a crazy person who's introduced in a normal situation or whatnot. And, you could go through The Simpsons and like all these things. And that's really what it is. So things can be, I don't want to sound too reductive, but to me, that helps me create. Because rather than looking for a galaxy of things to create from, which can be very daunting, it allows me to localize and narrow. And then from that, if we want to create something much bigger, it's from something that was easy to get to. Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah. So you bucket in a very different way than we might bucket. Like, why are there some people who actually like Chris Angel? Versus, people who like David Blaine and that sort of a thing. There's buckets. And I know, like, amongst yourselves, I'm sure that it's got to be even different. Yourselves as in the community of magic people. But right. Like, there are people who pull their trick off. There are people who are like just shenanigans. And you just like, I can't stand it. People like that guy. But there are also people who are so similar, but that like fandoms basically think they're utterly different. Would that also be accurate? Are David Blaine and Chris Angel pretty much the same guy on one side of the curtain than the other to you in that way? Or
I don't know Chris that well.
I didn't mean them specifically.
But yeah, there are fandoms to these things, but to me, the best way, the way I often approach things is I used to want everyone to think I was so smart, whether I was smart or not. And then one day I was having dinner with a famous magic writer, and I was with his family, and they're not magicians whatsoever. So he's this famous magic writer, and I'm there in his house, and we're having dinner. And someone said, and this is when David Blaine had just done his first special and he levitated on the street.
Oh, right.
And they all said, "Oh my God." They said to my friend, the famous magic writer, they said, "That was unbelievable. Do you know how he did that? That was a miracle." And now this guy knows everything about everything. And he said, it was so remarkable. We don't know. That was just so remarkable. And He did it in such a genuine, not in a wink way, but he just did it in such a, like, that their love of the miracle and their astonishment and wonderment with the miracle so took precedent of him looking better in their eyes that this was 20 odd years ago, that I rarely answer questions like that, just because to me, I try to keep the wonderment at the highest level. So it's like, yeah, everyone has their fans and there's reason everyone should have their fans or whatnot, but I don't usually go into that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How likely are we to recognize those moments when they happen? Because when you were saying that,
Yeah.
I got that feeling you get when you were really imparted with wisdom and you were there to receive it. All of everything aligned just so. And I was thinking about, it made me immediately think of a moment with Seth Godin. And what it relates to is I've never met Seth in person. This is an early meeting with him. It's 07 or something, 08. And we're at a lunch with his clients. Like we kind of forgot the time. We lost track of the time. And he said, well, I'll go to lunch, but Chris is coming with. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like dragged into this adventure. And they asked Seth a pretty interesting, like hardball-y kind of question for his first question, because they had paid for the lunch,
Right.
meaning they paid for the consult.
Right.
And Seth, like he's leaning back in his chair and everything. And he just looks over so full of energy. And he just says, Chris, what do you think? And I had like a creative orgasm all over the place. I was like, oh my God, Seth Godin just threw the hands. Ah!
Somebody needs to make me that yellow flag gif we talked about that I can put up in here.
Shut up. Decades later, I remember that so vividly. And I try my hardest all the time to pass the torch in my dumb way, my lower down the rungs way. So anyway.
Well, by the way, Seth is a magician too, by the way. He used to do magic when he was a kid. He may still do it now. But so what you just said, the things that create the biggest sense of astonishment is when the miracle happens in the person's hands, the audience's hands. And when I say hands, it could be in their mind, like it doesn't have to be a physical object thing. It's always a wonderful performer I know named Michael Amar. Years ago, he did a study. He went around to senior citizens' homes and he asked people, he said, did any of you ever see a magician live? And the people who did, he said, do you remember any tricks? And he said, overwhelmingly, it was not someone sawed a lady in half on stage. It was, he made my quarter disappear, or the card I was holding changed places with the card he was. It's always about them. It's always something that takes place in their life. And so to me, the Seth thing that you just said is he made the miracle happen for you. I remember a few years ago, I was working with a client, Mark Miller, who sold 1 million books. He's at Chick-fil-A. He's an amazing guy, a real servant leadership guy, just astonishing. And I was working with him and a few other people who he had brought along. And like they had paid me and they flew me in. I was in their house or so. And I remember the first thing that Mark said to me before we were about to start my workshop to help them. Mark said to me, we sat on the couch and Mark leaned into me and he said, Mark, for this to be a worthwhile effort for you, because we want to make sure you get something out of this. What would need to have happened for you to get a lot of it? And he really meant it. It was not like something, it's like, wait a minute, you're my client, you're paying me, and you're asking me what I'm going to get out of this? And he meant it in the most earnest way possible. And I always remember it. And essentially the miracle happened in my hands. So that's why when I speak, if you ever see me doing keynote speeches or so, I essentially do a workshop from the stage. I am constantly speaking to the audience. I'm constantly having them break up and do stuff and report out. Like it's all about them, because nothing that I can say could be as interesting as their lives. Does that make another super quick story? One of my all-time favorite books is there's a Phil Dusenberry, who used to be the CEO of BBDO. And this book had 2 different names. In hardcover, it was called something like We Set His Hair on Fire. And in paperback, it was called something like A Great Idea is worth 1,000, A Great Insight's worth 1,000 good ideas, or something like that. Same book. But Dusenberry, the whole book's about coming up with insights and the power of an insight to generate all kinds of new thinking and new solutions. And I always remember him saying this. He said, I used to play golf, and yes, then we set his hair on fire. Thank you. He said, I used to play golf, And no matter how many people told me, I would always use my biggest club, my driver, and I would take this big home run swing and I'd hit the ball further than anyone else, but it would never be accurate. I'd always pull left, I'd slice right, but I always beat everyone in distance. And people would constantly say, why are you doing that? That's stupid. What? And I never listened to him. He said, one day though, I was playing with a pro. We were in teams. It was a regular person and a pro. And so in my team, I did that. And I pulled the ball and I had to go into the bushes and the pro came with me to try to find my ball. And the pro said to me, Phil, if I told you that we could pick up your ball right now, put it in the center of the fairway, the center of the green, but just move it 50 feet further back from where you would come from, but it would be in the middle of the green, would you take me up on it? And he said, here I am, mosquito bites, searching for the ball. Where is it? He said, duh, yeah, of course I do that. And he said, that's what would happen if you used a smaller club and didn't swing so hard. And he said, it was the first time in my life. He said, instantly I changed in how I approached golf because I was standing in the weeds looking for my ball. And like, so the miracle happened to him like in that moment in his time. He said in the same book, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, he said that when he was a teenager, he learned how to sell or how to pitch, that he was a teenager and he was working in some little department store, like one level department store, where you would sit in a big corner elevated like office looking out on the entire floor and you had a microphone. And his job one day was to make up sales. And so he said something like, for the next 15 minutes, 3 pairs of ladies, whatever, socks are now 99 cents. And he saw people running from different parts of the store to go to the lady sock section.
Those were nice socks.
What's that?
Those were nice socks.
Right, exactly.
Pink Argyle.
That's right. But like, to me, imagine that you're a kid and seeing the power of what you said, depending on your offer, people drop what it is they're doing to run. And so to me, you know what I mean? Like, again, the miracle happened for him right there. If you had said it to him abstractly beforehand, it probably would have sounded okay, but it happened to him. So it's always like what's going to happen to them? What's going to freak them out? Forgive me for blabbering on and on. But
no, it was a great blabber. There are some real gems. I'm like writing numbers, timestamps down so I can come grab some of these. So that was a worthwhile one. And what a story about the driving. By the way, I took that story in such a whole different direction. I took the story as, the pro, they're out in the bushes together and the pro looks to him and he just says, hey, Phil, I do the same thing. And like, it was going to be this like total justification of like, I know you like to waste time and I know you're an idiot and I know nobody likes playing golf with you because of the stupid thing you do, but I like it. And
you love those belonging stories. You're
that's
like,
Chris Brogan.
You're just like me.
You're a stupid idiot, just like me. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mark's like, fixed it. You're welcome.
Mark, does magic hold? And I know we're talking so much of magic, but it's because the things that we talk about magic, like inspired the things that you've done with business. Do you, in your process of, sorry, rewind a sentence. When you find that there are people who like magic and who like making magic and who are just a student of it and appreciate it so much so that they watch all the little meetings and all that sort of a thing. Is there a magic lover persona the way there's a comic book fan persona, such as there's a wrestling show persona and all that? What makes someone say, oh, magic, this is my jam?
It's really intoxicating to seemingly suspend the rules of reality, even momentarily. Like, it's just something that you can't get over. So when you do it, even if you're the one who is creating the illusion of the suspension of reality, the fact that you could share that with someone, I mean, everyone out there, watching, like, we all love to share, Imagine that you're creating some piece of hyper reality and it's putting a smile on people's face and they're going, oh my God, or they're saving something that you gave them. Like you borrowed a coin of theirs that they marked and then you apparently bent it with your mind at your fingertip. And now they carry it around like a good luck token. Like there's very few things that you can do to match that. So to me, it's just people who like get this appreciation of this like specific form. And by the way, it's even the story behind this stuff. So I remember as a kid, as a 4-year-old, there was a book, I think it was called, I got it from the Scholastic Book Club, and it was called Spooky Magic. And there was a trick in it, and it was called, like the floating rope trick. And all it was you took a spool of thread and you unspooled like a foot, and you took a comb and you rubbed it on your sleeve, and through static electricity, you made the rope dance. Now, I knew what static electricity was even at the time, but the idea that the rope was levitating was so like, I still remember the trick to this day, even though I knew the method. The story was so great that I fell in love with the story. It's like, I can make a rope float, even though, again, I knew damn well what I was doing. I remember a friend of mine who is a magic historian, and he's also a science teacher. He actually teaches public school teachers how to use magic to demonstrate science. His name's Bob Friedhofer. And I once asked Bob, I was interviewing him, I was writing an article on him, and he was talking about in Greek temples, they actually made giant doors into the temples that could open on their own based on principles of pneumatic, whatever. Like, so in other words, suction or whatever. So the doors would seemingly open on their own. And I asked Bob, did the civilization back there think it was God's opening the door, or did they think it was science opening the door because they overtly had put in these things?
Right.
He said it probably didn't make any difference to them. God and science were the same thing. Like you could show them the method and it was still God. You know what I mean?
Very muddled. Like you'd be a student of the magical arts, or like, it wasn't magic. It was like a kind of science. They had a very muddled idea about things like that.
Well, but like it was like everything was mystical.
Right.
Like you can explain either that happened and I didn't know how it happened, or I helped bring it about, but we're all mystical. And so it was still mystical. And you know what I mean? It's the story of the thing. What were you going to say?
I just launched into like one of those dumb party questions that people ask, the kind of would you rathers or whatever. And I've always found this question kind of vexing. Would you rather find everything, magical and crazy that it happened, or would you rather find nothing, interesting or whatever? And I thought it's so hard, because if nothing is interesting, then your life is just one boring note. But if everything's interesting, it's like, how did I get here? How am I talking to Mark and Carrie and everybody else? It would be a shitty life. I just pooped.
No, you'd be happy all the time. Think about that. I don't know. Seems like an easy choice to me. Mark?
Well, if I were, of course, the answer is somewhere in between. But if I had to pick one of those extremes, for certain, it would be that everything is magical. That nothing is magical is just, to me, like, again, right, like, why? Go on.
You'd be like, oh my God, they still have 99-cent cassette tapes at Safeway. That's amazing.
Right.
They're in a box in the back, but wow.
Well, and by the way, the fact that everything's magical, and we talked about these ideas of enforced creativity. One of the things I do, this is just my like off time stuff. I walk around and I look at objects or at people or whatnot, and I say, what is super cool about that? Like, again, what's something about this that is not obvious?
You're the creepy guy who's like, hey, I like your purse. Tell me why it's magical. People
right.
Call the police.
Right. But exactly, like when I'm going for walks, it's not like something great about me. It's just how I've trained myself to think. I'm walking down the street and it's like, oh, why is the tree bark segmented like that? And why is that? And, like, just what are all the things? I once was working for an organization, and the CEO said this to me, and he didn't mean it as a compliment. He was actually meant it kind of as a bewildering insult to me. He said, Mark, he said, you're the only person I know who, when you ask people how they're doing, you really want to know. And I said, that's true. I said, if I ask you how you're doing, I actually am going to ask you follow up. Like I really want, oh, what are you working on? What's cool? If I didn't want you to say anything, I'd just say, hey, or something like that. It would be, and by the way, related to that, this actually happened to me 2 days ago. I take these 5 to 10 mile walks every day at the end of the business day. And, like through parks here, I'm in Jersey, I'm in Morristown and Jockey Hollow Park here. And
here's my GPS coordinates.
Right, exactly.
Come find me so I can tell you why you're magical.
Exactly. And so I'm walking through there, and it's about 5:30, and I'm passing someone, all social distance. We're all very far away from each other. And I said to someone, it was like 5:30. And as I was coming up to him, I wasn't quite sure what to say. And I said, oh, good evening. And like, that's not something I normally say. And I don't think it's anything anyone's ever said to me in my life. But,
Bela Lugosi.
Right. I said the exact same thing. I thought to myself, I'm like Bela Lugosi. And so I thought, this is just how I think, but this is the idea of enforced creativity. I thought to myself, what's the difference between good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night? Good morning means like that's starting a conversation. You're supposed to follow up with something. Good night means we're done. Like you wouldn't say good night and then say, oh, so tell me what you're up to or whatnot. That would be considered rude. So good morning is let's start the conversation. Good night is the conversation's over. But good afternoon and good evening, which almost no one uses anymore. Like, what are those even? And like, are they part of those other two? But they're all good.
This is in New Jersey, because I feel like in Boston, any of those could be like, this conversation is over.
Yeah, but in Boston always says good night.
Well, yeah.
Any time of day.
Any time of day, yeah.
Have you ever said good evening to anyone?
No, never. No. I don't drink other people's blood, just my own.
Right. Do you ever say good afternoon? That's almost unheard of.
No. I mean, I guess if I were addressing the United Nations.
Right.
All I can imagine.
I'm a lawyer and I've never said that.
Right. So it's only good morning and good night. What happened to good afternoon and good evening?
Nobody cares. That's
it's
what
a
happens.
Conspiracy. That's what it is.
We all work all the time. What's the difference what time of day it is? Come on, Mark.
Right.
This is like genders.
That in French all the time. What do you say in French all the time?
Good afternoon and good evening and all the middles.
Oh, okay.
All the things.
Federico had a question early on that I liked and I wanted to go grab it. Don't touch anything. Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
Mark,
do
you tie together magic in your writing, and do you have tips on magical writing?
Fetty, he's brilliant. That sounds like a Fetty question, so I love that. Thank you for that. So do I tie? Yeah, because things have to happen in the audience's hands. Like the show that I co-created, Chamber Magic, there's like you've never been to such an interactive magic show in your life. Every single trick, even the very first trick, it's just a card trick to get people warmed up, but about 20 people in the audience are participating. And that's on purpose because we want to get every single trick's like that. People get up, they surround Steve, you get there, you call out the suit of the card, you call out, like everything is to involve as many people as possible. So in my writing, I invariably try to draw the audience in. I speak to them about like their life, but I actually try to have them I try to make, I co-wrote a book called How to Persuade People Who Don't Want to Be Persuaded with a brilliant magician, Joel Bauer, and trade show performer that many people know, and pitchman. And really the way we open that book, I open the book in a very menacing way. For the first page and a half, it's super menacing. It says, what you're about to read is about persuasion, but not in a nice way, not in a Dale Carnegie way, not in a way where you throw someone's first name into a conversation or so. This is the stuff of nightmares. This is the stuff that people use to persuade, blah, 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 blah. When I talk about these ideas to some people, they walk out on me because they're so offended by blah, 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 blah. So I go on and on about this in Joel's voice. And then like you skip a line and it's, reader, you were just hit with a persuasion technique, the fright challenge. I liken it to the way the carnival barker stands out and says, ladies and gentlemen, da, da, da. And we start talking about the fright challenge and how to use it in your business, or so. But that would be an example of when you started reading the book, you didn't know what I was doing to you. You were in the experience. And then once you were soaked in the experience, it was then, oh, by the way, this was an experience. Like, right? The walls came up, it was a movie set and whatnot, but you didn't know that. So that would be, to Fetty, an example of me using magic ideas in what it is that I'm writing for regular audiences.
Magic, manipulation, tomato.
No, I wouldn't say it's manipulation. I'm a big believer in the fact of I don't want to sound overly promotional, which is why I'm hesitating, but what the hell? A few years ago, I did a video series for O'Reilly Media called Influencing People Honestly, Ethical Persuasion Strategies for Leaders, Managers, and Entrepreneurs. It teaches you persuasion strategies that are so fair that you could share them with the person you were trying to persuade as you were trying to persuade them, and they would applaud you for it. And it's because these are strategies not of manipulation or distortion or boxing someone into a corner. It was more about making your idea vivid so they can actually see it, right? Giving them ways to test your idea out before they commit to it and stuff like that. It was like, so to me, it's because years ago thank you so much. Years ago, when I was in sales, I started as a kid. I worked for a certain sales organization, and the sales pitch was so structured and what I considered manipulative that it made me feel dirty. I was just, and so
I like that feeling, Mark. That's why I became a lawyer.
Right, but just to finish the thought, it's the fact of I felt so bad about it. I said, if I sell for the rest of my life, I'm never going to use a strategy that I would be ashamed of if someone caught me using it.
That makes sense.
So, you know what I mean? Like, by the way, sometimes my strategies are things like, it's stuff that I make up just based on honesty or whatnot. I have, it's like the Jean-Paul Sartre close or something. It's like the existential close. Like if someone's hesitating, I'll say, look, you agreed, like you need this thing to happen in your business. You need a big, sexy idea. Like, and I'm the guy to give it to you. Now you might think the fact that you found me, you might think, oh my God, I'm so in luck. And I don't need to commit to this right now. But let me tell you, I'm 57. I'm getting older. I'm like, you don't know if I'm going to be hit by a truck. You don't know, like whatever. So like, and really it sounds like I'm telling a joke or being manipulative. I'm not. It's just how I think the world. It's like, you know what? We have a limited time here.
Right.
You don't know when that time is. So I'm saying, like, don't fall under the illusion that I'm going to be around and accessible forever.
It's benign scarcity, really.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever written songs for people, but it's interesting how a lot of what you say really touches on songs. I mean, there's a British performer, Farouk Bulsara. He was an immigrant from, I think he was from Iran originally, Farouk. But Farouk Bulsara had said things like, it's a kind of magic. So I was going to talk on that because, there's a lot of things that you talk about that are a kind of magic, even if they're not the actual performative art. And just then you just said, who wants to live forever? And that was another one of his songs. And so it's just interesting to me how connected you are to the music of Queen without necessarily knowing it. I find that fascinating.
John wants to know, if this is a 90-degree segue of mine, what is an example of an underused strategy of positive persuasion?
Oh, great question.
Brass knuckles?
Well, so to take John's question, so John, can you post what John said there?
Yep.
Yeah. So here's an example. So I love that question. And so again, ethical persuasion, I'm not trying to like hide anything or whatnot. I read this many years ago in a book of a friend of mine. The book's out of print. His name's Barry Tarshish. And in the book, he talked about that the strongest word in any sentence is the last word. The last word of a sentence is what people think the sentence is about. And by the way, if what I'm saying to you here sounds subtle, if you just learn this from this whole conversation, you would sound like you were writing for Esquire. It would elevate your writing to such a degree. So if I looked at what John's wonderful question was, what is an example of an underused strategy of positive persuasion? What's the most important word in that sentence?
Underused.
Underused, exactly. You'll get it 100 times out of 100. So the way to write that sentence in a way that's more persuasive would be, what's an example of a positive persuasion strategy that's underused? And now people are taking away, underused. And if you make 80% of your sentences like that, your writing is going to sing. And by the way, if you create like headlines for your website or so, like I use that idea everywhere I go. It's like, okay, yeah, that's good. Here's the better form of it. And it's like magic. It's this stunning thing. It's like, oh shit. So John, I hope that answered your question. And by the way, I hope I gave you a little sample, like a visceral sample of Chris's meme. Mind blown, right, Chloe? Exactly.
No, so that's, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about this ties the magic, the persuasion, and the writing together. Because said a whole other way, you know how to teach people how to punch up their words, and punching up small paragraphs and small portions is every bit as important as blowing out everything, because sometimes we only have one sentence. I tell my video creators, you are pitching from the first sentence. If you don't hit them in the first sentence, you might have 6 seconds. You then have 30 seconds. You hope to get to a minute. And as Justin has said before, we only have 4 minutes to save the world. So, I mean, it's really, you've got these things.
Right. Well, that's why some people are down on elevator speeches, and my whole business is elevator speeches. I mean, I love elevator speeches, but that's why the elevator speeches that I help people to create, I've had elevator speeches like consultants and other thought leaders hire me to increase their fees by up to 2,000%.
Wow.
It's stuff like, or if I just want to be clear, I'll say something. I always say stuff in a way that people haven't really heard before, so they have to pay attention. It's like, oh, what do you do, Mark? Oh, I'm a differentiation expert. I differentiate organizations and brands and thought leaders and political campaigns and TV shows and live shows. Right?
So we have to roll out of here, but I just found that you found love in an elevator, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I want to know what love is, but I also want to know, I always ask the question, what would you put in your backpack? What's that thing that goes in the backpack? And you've given us, our backpack's overstuffed, and I'm going to steal away the one that you already gave me the other day when I asked you the question. I said, what would you put in your backpack? He said, another backpack.
A magic trick, of course.
I double my capacity.
Doubles the capacity, which always reminds me of the Joan Rivers joke when she was making fun of how Joan Collins had gained some weight lately. I was out having a meal with Joan Collins, and they said, what would you like on your hamburger? And she said, a hot dog. That's what I thought of when you said the other backpack. And God bless Joan Rivers for telling fat jokes on her actor friends. I like that. But
I was like, you're wishing
backpack?
For more wishes.
Yep. What goes in the backpack? What is the extra thing that you can add to both of your backpacks or either of your backpacks to help people move forward?
Oh, right, because I have 2 backpacks. Well, probably if I could only add one thing to my backpack, it would probably be a deck of cards. And the reason why, see, magicians do a lot of card tricks, and it's as much for the magician as it is for the audience, because because you can do so many thousands of different things with a deck of cards, and you can practice sleight of hand, and there's mathematical things, and you can tell fortunes, and like even cards themselves, like if you add up all the values, they add up to like 365, and there's, you know, like there's like they're based on calendars and things like that. There's so much. In the old days, cards were explosive. Actually, in the 1930s, someone in a prison once committed suicide by taking the leg of his metal bed, it was hollow, and taking the red cards, because it was magnesium or something that they were made out, and scraping all the magnesium off the cards into his leg post, and then lighting on fire and blowing himself up and killing himself with a deck of cards. You can rip cards in half, the whole deck at once. You can do so much with them that, to me, that's almost like, you know, like isolated on an island. Like I wouldn't even know that I was the only person on the island for like 6 months.
Because you had your cards ready.
Cards there.
All right. Well, I only